Last time we met the Krenim. They weren't a threat, and then they were, because Clarence Boddicker from RoboCop is playing silly buggers with time. His ship, that looks a bit like a sonic screwdriver, is flying about and deleting species, apparently so he can restore a timeline where his pet hare had someone attached to it. Voyager got proper messed up by the mostly restored Krenim until Seven designed shields to defend against their time-travelling fireworks. This shield also isolated them from changes to the timeline when Clarence last fiddled about. Unfortunately, Voyager being protected from changes also asked up Clarence's last calculation, so he flew over to kill us a bit after taking Chakotay and Paris to do science to them. Voyager legged it, but largely shook itself apart in the process, so Janeway ordered everybody except senior staff into escape pods. Seems like an awful idea to me, as they'd no longer be protected by the time shield, but Voyager doesn't have enough working decks left to support them, so that's that. Oh, and Tuvok's blind now as he shielded Seven from an unexploded bomb. Which is to say, it was unexploded until it exploded. Well, that describes all bombs, doesn't it? What I mean is, this one didn't... Look, just go watch the video if you don't understand, alright? Jesus. Voyager's hiding inside a nebula with only essential staff, which for some reason includes Kim. There's gas from the nebula inside Voyager, which even I know is probably not meant to happen. Kim says it's a problem with the ventilation system, which, given it almost destroyed the ship because of some cheese a while back, sounds about right. They fix the problem, but not before melting a bit of Janeway's lungs. She hasn't the time for proper treatment, so the doc fills her full of breathing juice from a hypospray. To the screwdriver ship, where Chakotay is being dragged to an interrogation. Or not, as he's instead shaved, clothed, and brought to Clarence. There's a lavish banquet, rather raising the question of how metabolisms work if they're unaffected by the passage of time, but let's ignore that for now. Paris joins them after Chakotay drops the detail that they've been here for 2 months, and Clarence begins the good cop routine. He explains their situation, that Voyager is an unknown in his calculations and needs to be resolved, but that need not mean erasure. He offers to restore them, to change history in such a way that they were never in contact and thus never caught up in this mess. All he needs is detailed data about their past. His offer of altruism might be more believable if he didn't mention that the banquet in front of them was made up of delicacies from civilizations he's deleted. If you want people to believe you're capable of compassion, performing a passable impression of a Nazi officer gloating over stolen loot might not be the best way to go about it. Paris seems to agree and tells him to bollocks. Chakotay, on the other hand, seems somewhat more open to the prospect, providing it can be done with no harm to others. Paris is removed to his new and improved quarters, whilst Clarence and Chakotay discuss the minutiae of time shenanigans. The crew of Voyager, what's left of them, is dining on somewhat more meagre fare. Janeway receives reports from all concerned and is unhappy with how repairs are going, saying we'll leave the space fog tomorrow regardless. Seven, who seems to constitute senior staff despite technically being neither, points out that this is complete bullshit. To her credit, Janeway doesn't shoot her, though that may be due to a lack of power. As Seven leads Tuvok away, he points out the error in correcting the captain in front of the crew, regardless of whether she's right. It's an interesting little exchange, where Seven highlights the paradox of people saying she should think more independently, then being asked to keep it to herself. Points to the writers. A month later, Chakotay is telling Clarence about an asteroid Voyager diverted course to avoid. Had they not, they'd have missed the Krenim entirely, so Clarence tells him to run a simulation on the effects of deleting it. The results are somewhat mixed, though the several thousand species he just erased would probably word it more strongly. Portions of that comet had previously impacted a planet and sparked life. Removing the comet and its past removed those impacts and the evolution of life that they caused. It's a lesson, of course. Clarence knew it would go tits up because he's made the same mistake too. His first alteration was to erase a species who'd been the Krenim's main enemy. The Krenim had expanded as a result, but the guys he erased were the source of an antibody in the Krenim and, without it, a plague wiped most of them out. Each subsequent change was never quite what he wanted, so here we are, 200 years later, still dicking around. Tangentially, when he monologues about the changes, he mentions erasing species and then bringing them back, which, if that's an option, raises the question of why he didn't just undo the first change. Every additional change just adds more variables, which is a basic no-no of science in general. But, again, I digress. Chakotay admits he has a lot to learn, the humility seeming to strike a chord with Clarence, who offers to show Chakotay the heart of the ship as a result. Have we been playing the long game all this time? Perhaps Chakotay, being so bad at spotting spies in his own crew, has helped him play one himself. Nearly a month later on Voyager, and they're being attacked by giant rabbit shit. Not really, of course, as they're micrometeoroids. At least Kim says they are anyway, which makes it impressive that we can see them as, according to NASA, that classification is smaller than a grain of sand. Regardless, they're bad news, as we don't have shields at the moment. They start scraping away the hull, so Janeway goes to sort out those shields, which is a problem because the equipment for it is on a deck that's currently hazardous. The hazard in question is a really big fire. No time for messing about, so Janeway grabs some debris to make a shield. A metal shield. Of metal. Against a hot thing. She runs in and we switch to Kim telling us what she's doing so they don't have to film it. Shields come back, but Janeway doesn't, instead having a nice warm nap. She wakes up on a cot in whatever's serving as the doc's sickbay these days. He's repaired the physical damage, save for the scarring, but is more concerned about her psychological wounds. Her actions have been increasingly erratic, taking more and more serious risks. She refuses as he tells her to stay for observation, and he's forced to remind her that he has the power to remove her. She threatens to disable him, and that threat is all the proof he needs that she's unfit. He formally relieves her of command, but there's the small problem of not having guards or a brig, so she just ignores him anyway. He tells her that this will result in a court-martial should they get home, but she's fine with that. Tangentially, I'd have liked him to contact Tuvok to make it formal and see what happened as a result. Not doing so seems borderline negligent, and it's a little disappointing that the writers didn't have time or inclination to follow that thread. Another month later, and former Captain Janeway, now escaped criminal, is surveying damage with Neelix. They slip into Chakotay's quarters, and, for some reason, Janeway's tricorder homes in on the watch he tried to give her for her birthday. As he was told to recycle it, I assume he's now on report, but she's not really in a position to judge on disobeying orders, so she keeps it. Over on the screwdriver ship, Paris is playing games with Clarence's subordinate, the one who wanted to call it a day when they achieved a 98% success in the last episode. Subordinate is lamenting his family, dead now some 200 years, or never existed, depending on your point of view, and Paris spies an opportunity. When he sees Chakotay, he tells him that the crew were tired of all this time shenanigan shite and just want to go home. Subordinate has told him that if the main temporal what's-it that Clarence showed Chakotay earlier was turned off, the entire rest of the ship would be irrelevant. There's just one problem. Chakotay's been convinced by Clarence. He's bought into the line that they can fix it all and everything will be lovely. They nearly come to blows before an alarm sounds. To the bridge, as we apparently now have free reign of the ship, where we discover Clarence is going to erase another species. Chakotay pleads with him to keep working on the calculation, but he fires anyway. Tangentially, these planets all tend to look a bit healthier after they've been cleared. I wonder if that's an intentional comment on our own world. Clarence retires to his quarters while reports are prepared, and Paris tells Chakotay that he's not going to wait anymore. Chakotay goes to see Clarence, arguing that the last erasure was unnecessary. Clarence launches into a bit of a rant about how he's responsible for destroying a Krenim colony, the one with his wife on, who, presumably, was the former owner of his pet hare. Every attempt since then has been to get that colony back, and nothing else matters. It's an obsession now, so much so that he believes he's pissed time off and it's holding a grudge. Subordinate comes in to tell him the colony wasn't restored, and after Clarence tells Chakotay that he has no intention of stopping, Chakotay leaves. Paris makes the most of his rare opportunity to gloat about being right. Chakotay still wants to believe Clarence is just misguided, but it's difficult to argue for the stability of someone who thinks time wants to kick his head in. The good news is that Subordinate is willing to let Paris contact Voyager so they can bring this whole thing to a head. They'll need Janeway to attack while they disable the temporal what's-it, as there's no telling how things will go down with the rest of the crew if they just sabotage it. Chakotay gives his blessing, and we get started. A couple of weeks later, and Janeway's getting ready to attack the screwdriver ship after receiving Paris's call. She's even found some mates to help, and there'll be more arriving once we start the pylon. The plan is to arrive, wait for Paris to mess up the temporal what's-it on the screwdriver ship, then kick the shit out of them while grabbing our people. B'Elanna and Kim are ordered onto one of the alien ships to start working on time shields for all, so the screwdriver ship doesn't simply erase them. Everybody else, including the Doc, will be going to another, leaving only Janeway on Voyager, which may or may not get there before shaking itself apart. There are arguments, of course, but they all follow orders in the end. Goodbyes are goodbyed, with some more of that Janeway Tuvok stuff I enjoyed a couple of episodes ago, and the former captain takes her chair on an otherwise empty ship. Another month later, and we're approaching the screwdriver ship. They're detected, and Chakotay distracts Clarence, while Subordinate gives Paris the access he needs to arse around with their temporal what's-it. While he's working on it, the attack begins. They can't do anything until Paris comes through, and, even worse, it looks like the time shields don't do a damn thing, as 2 ships are erased. Clarence tells Subordinate to target the others, only for him to decide it's full-on mutiny time. Subordinate does the job that Paris failed to do and turns off the temporal what's-it, then teleports Chakotay and Paris away too. What a lad! Clarence pulls him out of the way and takes over himself, but he's too late as their time toys are no longer working. Tuvok calls Janeway to tell her they've got Chakotay and Paris, and she tells him to target the temporal what's-it on the screwdriver ship. Clarence might be out of time toys, but he's got normal guns too, and starts pooping purple at the fleet. A damaged ship crashes into Voyager, causing some nasty sparks on the bridge and a bit of falling over. On the plus side, the view screen has been upgraded to high definition. As Clarence gets ready to do more pooping, Tuvok tells Janeway that all the guns on every ship in the fleet are broken. Taking a leaf from Chakotay's book, she sets a collision course for the screwdriver ship and tells everybody to disable their time shields. She thinks destroying it might reset time, which doesn't really make any sense based on the established functionality, but we're doing it anyway, so shut up. Janeway rams them and Voyager kabooms. Clarence runs to defend his pet hare, but the container breaks and it ceases to exist. The ship kabooms too, sending out a big time wibbly. Everything is erased, and none of what happened matters. As a 1 year younger Voyager enters Krenim space, they're hailed by a somewhat more friendly hyperspace Oppenheimer, so called after we used the Wheel of Names last week, who tells them that the area is in dispute and suggests they go around, so they do. On an alien colony, the original owner of Clarence's pet hare manages to convince him that his work can wait. They go to spend the day together, as a zoom shot on his work implies that history is destined to repeat. Fuck time travel stories. I was watching this whole thing hoping they wouldn't just wipe it at the end, that we'd get something significant out of it, but that big red reset button gets slapped harder than a lazy comedian at an awards ceremony, and we're abruptly told that it simply didn't happen. What makes it worse is that there was so much in this one to like. It deserves to matter. It deserves to have consequences. We learned things about characters and there was actual growth and insight. To throw that on the bonfire with a quick, and then it went back to normal, isn't just wasteful. It's insulting. You've taken an hour and a half of my time, told an interesting story with it where everybody does a great job, and then said, but it didn't happen. I don't know how much of this is what was forced onto the show by executives who insisted it should be as modular as possible, that missing a week shouldn't matter. But that didn't need to mean a full reset. Right up until the end, nobody dies. Nobody is irreparably changed. One more week, one different but connected story where we repair the ship and have the Doc sort Tuvok's eyes and Janeway's scars with a working sickbay. An episode where we heal. Imagine a follow-up where Janeway surrenders herself to the Doc for psychological evaluation, and we spend that time running through what made her act as she did. Gods know we're crying out for a Janeway backstory episode, and this would have been the perfect chance. We've done it before. The second episode of this season has continuity from the Scorpion two-parter. But no, it simply didn't happen. Next week we'll meet another new alien, and I'll spend the whole thing being annoyed at the thought of what we could have had instead. End of episode.
Every day, hundreds of Starfleet crew members that aren't attractive or talented enough to be part of the main cast are killed in a variety of outlandish and often hilarious ways. But these walking corpses slaughtered for our amusement don't train themselves, and without constant replacements, many captains face the risk of losing someone that actually matters. With your help, we can make sure that doesn't happen.
For just $1 a month at patreon.com/USSpedant,
you can fund recruitment campaigns on planets that don't know any better, ensuring there's always an unnamed ensign ready to die so the pretty people don't have to. Unless we need a ratings boost or it's the last season. Thank you.